So during today's class, we looked at this idea of abolitionism. And I was happy that the majority of you remembered that word from when you learned about the Civil War back in 8th grade. And you recall that abolitionism was the movement to get rid of slavery. And some people were thinking, how is this a revolution? But it certainly is, because at the core, on the simplest of levels, a revolution is when you get rid of the old way and replace it with something different. Now, in terms of how abolitionism fits into our unit construct, the 1750 to 1900 construct, with nationalism, when you became a modern country, you had to ask yourself, do we want slavery in our country or not? And many countries said, no, we do not, which is related to political revolutions, because you had a revolution, you've changed up your country, do you want slavery in your new country? Many nations said, no, we do not. Now, in terms of industrialism, this might be hard to see how this fits in, but again, when we see the rise of machines doing the work for men, people are going to opt for machines more than human beings for profit, not because of morality. It could be morality, but most of the time it's saying, okay, shoot, this machine can do the work of man and make me more money. Okay, sign me up for that. So that had something to do with abolitionism. And then in terms of imperialism, these big, powerful nations going off around the world to colonize other people, you could have your colonial subjects do some work that is borderline slavery. In fact, it's kind of a form of slavery in some places in the world, but you don't need an explicit slavery system. So that's how it fits into these four big ideas from the unit. So here's the big questions of the day. Number one, how much of abolitionism was due to human morality, and how much was due to those other factors like industrialism? Number two, why was Britain's decision to end slavery so important on a global scale? And three, what legacies on the world were left behind by the institution of slavery? Okay, big question for you to think about and talk. So this map will give you the lay of the land for abolitionism. And this is when abolitionism occurred throughout the world. And we looked at it quite a bit in class, and you can pause it here to look at it. And you'll notice a few things. That there's a few nations that got rid of slavery a long time ago, this blue. But you're going to see the majority of the world lost slavery in this yellow and orange time. All of the South America, Central America, majority of North America, certainly in our time period, 1750 to 1900, this green to orange, a lot of the world got rid of slavery at the same time. Okay, that's how you can interpret this. And that's how the majority of people in class interpret this. So, reminder, and I think this is pertinent to the conversation of where slaves from Africa came to. Okay, we all remember West Africa, but where did they arrive? So you look at the West Indies, you look at Brazil, you look at Latin America, you look at British North America, going back to this, again, about the same time it goes away. Okay, so hopefully you already knew that, where they went, and if you knew that, good job. Big brain stuff. But now for the new information. I thought I'd throw in a hokey meme for no good reason. Why not? Okay, anyway. So when you look at the early abolitionism movement, abolitionists advocated the end of slavery. So at first it was saying, the slavery has to go away. But they didn't call for this immediate, really quick ending. They said, just let's slowly end it. Let's matriculate it out slowly. And slaveholders should be compensated, because their rationale is saying, well, they put a lot of money into these people. They're not just going to give up the people and lose all their money. You can compensate them. There was a movement for freed slaves to be taken back to Africa, which resulted in the nation of Liberia being founded. So this early movement at the beginning of the 19th century, kind of slow going, but then it picked up, okay? In the middle part of the 19th century, we get a more, what word am I looking for? A more committed form of abolitionism, and we see the agitation of black abolitionists as sign as black unrest. At a certain point, again, you cannot oppress people forever without them rising up. That's a rule of history. And some Christian denominations felt it was immoral to have slavery, which it is, okay? And some Christian denominations saw slavery as a sin. Unfortunately, there were other denominations that used that very same Bible to justify it, which goes to show you it's how you interpret things, right? And then this movement was called the Great Awakening, and it gained momentum. And you had literature, and you had leadership, and you had people speaking from the pulpits, and you had people winning the hearts and minds of others. And we see abolitionism growing. And again, I'm going to show you this one more time. You can see this momentum, you can see this growth, okay? Because, again, ton of 19th century abolitionism, in particular in the Americas, where huge numbers of slaves were sent to, in terms of the Caribbean and Brazil, and Latin America and America. So you're noticing that this momentum here, it had a good result. It worked. Okay, and we can see this. Unfortunately for America, we had to have a civil war. There's 1865 when the Civil War ended. But in time, slavery ended, okay? So here's kind of the nuts and bolts of slavery on one slide, okay? And this is kind of the big academic points I made in class. Enlightenment thinkers in the 18th century in Europe became increasingly critical of slavery as a violation of natural rights. Anti-slavery, abolitionist thinking increased with some Quakers and some Protestant evangelicals in Britain and the United States. So members of certain denominations became leaders in the abolitionist movement. And we see abolitionist movements in Britain. It brought pressure on governments to close down the slave trade. And in 1807, Britain did end the slave trade. Britain was a huge country, and I'll tell you why in a second why they were so important. And the British were very committed to it, to the point of having ships in the Atlantic stopping slaving. And then Brazil in 1888 was the last to do so in the Americas, okay? So this was a revolution of thought and action. So let's sum everything up. And the questions I'm going to pose to you. How much of abolitionism was due to human morality? How much was due to industrialism? Why was Britain's decision to end slavery so important on a global scale? And what legacies were left behind, okay? Now, if you missed class, we debated, okay? And there's not an easy answer here. This is not a 2 + 2 = 4 kind of answer. And you can divide it up in percentage. So why did slavery end? Some say it was based on strictly profits, that, machines were cheaper than men. And kind of harsh, but if you know how business works, it's all about getting that money. So that's an argument. It could be morality, religiosity, that religious pulpits and religious leaders said, slavery is a sin, cut it out. That could have something to do with it. It could be based on African resistance, that people are saying, these resistance movements, it's not fruitful for us to continue this practice. Some say it's just straight up industrialism. There's a school of thought that will say, why did slavery end? One word answer, industrialism. Okay, I don't know. It's similar to this first one, for the most profits. Or colonial labor was cheap. So these imperial countries that had a colony, they put the colonists to work. Might not be slavery per se, but it's coerced labor. So, hey, you're still making your money. You might not call it slavery, but it's a form of slavery. So anyway, that's a debate. Now, this question is a little more, there's some more correctness to this question. Why was Britain so important when they got rid of slavery? Okay. The empire which the sun never set. These are all the British holdings, okay? Now, if you look at this map, the red is what Britain controlled at their peak, their hegemony, their power. And when the people in power say, cut out slavery, okay, that trickled through all of this red. Even if you're really lousy at geography, that red is a lot of the world, okay? So when Britain got rid of slavery, it had a influence on these other holdings. Now, in terms of its legacy, I mean, you can write your PhD on this. This is not an easy answer, but on a very simple level, the legacy of slavery, there's sociological, linguistics, culinary, religious, in terms of customs, stories, the cultural diffusion. There's a tremendous human legacy in all of these studies, and you could do subsets of the legacy of slavery within all of these disciplines. But then the modern issues, like reparations, should the descendants of slaves be compensated for their ancestors' work? How should school present the subject? That's a real hot button issue. Should you talk about it? Should you not talk about it? Talk about it a little bit? Talk about it a lot? How did slavery affect the modern times? These sorts of things. So anyway, to wrap up, the abolitionist movement, you can see, was a revolution at the time that broke out about the same time in this unit, the 1750 and 1900 window, and what we see is slavery going away on an international level. Okay, so thank you for watching.